Welcome back to Pivot Points. I'm your host, Dave Allen, founder of Brand Pie, the brand consultancy working with businesses to deliver impact at pivotal moments in their journey. Catherine Day is a guest with a journey unlike any other we've explored. After a quarter of a century at the heart of the UK government, advising 8 prime ministers, she's come to a vital conclusion. There must be a better way. Catherine is co-founder of the National Strategy Project, a movement born from her lifelong desire to play her part in life. What happens when you follow your values and commit yourself to doing something selfless for the good of all people? You create the antidote to the malaise of modern leadership. Huge welcome to Catherine. Thank you so much for coming on Pivot Points, Catherine. Really excited to be talking to you today. And just to help our listeners, maybe you could just describe a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Dave. It's great to be here. So about me, I have recently emerged from a 25-year career in government, but I would like to think that that doesn't define me. I grew up in Northern Ireland. I live now in Devon, in the most beautiful spot, view down to the sea. I hadn't realised before moving here how important having that moment of lifting your soul every morning is when you wake up. But it's made a real difference to my life and that of my family. So the other thing about me is that I have 2 daughters and a family who I'm really proud of.
That's brilliant. And what made you go into government? Was it a passion or something that you felt you had to do when you were a young person coming out of university?
I think the honest answer is complete accident, but I have always been conscious of wanting to play my part in life, wanting to make the most of my life, wanting to do something for humans in life. And I've always been conscious, and from growing up in Northern Ireland in the Troubles, from studying anthropology at university, of the way in which we sort of organise ourselves as humans to survive and thrive being a really important thing in these times we're living through. We're so dependent on each other. And I suppose that I sort of partly saw government as a way of doing that and partly saw it as a tremendous source of adventures, of getting out and seeing the world when I was younger. And then very practically, I needed to get on and do something. I suppose I've always been interested also in what motivates people. And coming back to that anthropology thing, what takes us forward as a species. And so at the time when I started looking for jobs and what I might do, I was particularly interested by 2 things, because the internet hadn't massively taken off at that point. So I was really interested in the power of film to inspire people and move people. And then in the same sort of way, I guess I was interested in the power of government to organise people and get stuff done, or not, as it later turned out. So what ended up happening was that I went through that stage of just applying for anything when I realised I had to just get on with life and do something, anything to get going. And in the same week, I got 2 offers. I got one offer to go and be a runner on the next Steven Spielberg film. And I got one offer to go into this really lowly job in HR in the civil service. And I, to this day, sort of wonder about my decision-making processes personally. But I went with the civil service one. It had the advantage of being paid, which actually I thought was very, very important.
I mean, that's a huge pivotal moment in itself in your life, because you could end up being Spielberg's number 2 or taking over from Spielberg, and yet you chose government. So what was the decision-making criteria apart from being paid? Because I can't believe that was the only. And was it in the UK, the Spielberg job, or?
I have no idea. And I'm not sure that I applied any particular criteria at the time. I'm not sure I had that mental furniture right then. But the pay was important, actually, at that point. I felt strong need to stand on my own 2 feet and get on with something that would be a career. I don't know what running on a film leads to, Dave.
You basically get coffee and run around a lot and do odd jobs. But I don't know. I'm sure there's better people than me who know precisely what a runner does. But and was that in Northern Ireland, or was that coming to London, was that like a move across the sort of Irish Sea, or was that starting in Northern Ireland?
It was a bit of a move. No, it was starting in London, but I mean, I'd been in the UK for university anyway, so it wasn't that big a move. And I mean, our country is very centralised. At the time, I'd just grown up with the expectation that, yes, of course, I'd need to start off in London.
Was it a culture shock, or did you just ease into government and fit in straight away?
I think I spent the first 10 years in a constant state of absolutely flummoxed curiosity, completely unable really to understand why on earth things were done in the way that they were done. It takes a hell of a lot of learning, government. It's an incredibly complex system, an incredibly complex human system. I mean, once you bring humans into the equation, it adds a whole extra level of complexity. And I love learning. And so the fact that every day I was learning something new about this extraordinarily and often quite irrational way about how we run our country, and trying to bring a bit of common sense in, trying to sort of figure more things out about why things are the way they are, kept me going and led me to a succession of really, really interesting jobs. So I have always been interested in how we interact in the world, country as part of the world and the effect that that all has on us. So it had always appealed to me to work in the geopolitical, the national security, the international space. So I was looking out for jobs there and tended to gravitate towards those. And then once I was doing one of those jobs centrally in the cabinet office, so this job basically involved serving up decisions to prime ministers, to cabinets about our defence and overseas policy. That in turn sort of opened a whole raft of other questions. Why was it that I was dealing so often with issues that actually I thought should have just been solved? An awful lot of stuff bubbles up to the centre that doesn't feel like, or didn't feel to me at the time, like the most important stuff that we should be focusing the Prime Minister's mind on. We have a whole diplomatic service to deal with things in the world, for example. And so that question, sort of why is this happening, led me to various other roles. So to a conversation with the then Foreign Office about why we weren't much more effectively engaging the populations of countries abroad to help stabilise them, if that was our objective, to help put us onto a more environmentally sustainable footing, if that was the objective. So I ended up, through a process of asking questions, having a succession of amazing jobs. And probably my favourite one was making a TV programme that we broadcast into Iraq straight after the 2003 invasion of Iraq. And the whole point of that was to give people the information that they needed and just didn't have otherwise to help get their country back up and running again.
I mean, you're the first person I've spoke to who's actually worked in government and the civil service. It's normally business people I talk to. And I guess their careers are very much mapped out by the corporations that they worked for, and they have very clear sort of roles and targets and sales targets. What's the parallel in government? Does it chop and change with different political parties coming in? And does that make it difficult for the civil service to manage things with consistency? I think people would be fascinated to understand the sort of interaction between those two entities.
Yeah. Let me talk about the career path first. And my experience, my expectation going in was that there would be a very clear career path, that I would be helped to prepare or prepared over time for positions of national leadership, because that's what I understood the civil service to do. It's basically the mechanism whereby we manage our country, the things that keep our country ticking over, the health system, the welfare system, the way in which we relate to other countries through diplomacy and so on. And I expected a hugely professional approach, a succession of very clear roles that would prepare you for that sort of thing. What I found instead was quite a good sort of early stage development program. The civil service fast stream, I think, remains a sort of really good example for how you can get people up and running quite quickly into sort of early leadership positions. But beyond that, I didn't really find that there was anything. I found myself following a DIY career. If you wanted to progress and to be promoted, the incentives were all to not stay for very long in any given job. I found the system hugely politicized. I think that the UK system is more politicized than the American one. We're just less honest about it. And what I mean by that is, coming into the civil service, I had expected to find this wonderful institution dedicated to the public interest that impartially served the government of the day and spoke truth to power. So, would lay out the options for the government of the day and advise about the best ones. Instead, what I found was an institution that had come to see that role, serving the public interest, as being simply to execute whatever the set of politicians most recently elected had said in their manifestos, had promised. And over time, a number of times in my career, tensions appeared where those political promises, in my view, and actually in my experience, conflicted with the public interest. And there wasn't a mechanism then to do anything about that.
And so what happens in that? Because that must be a really difficult one to wrestle with, where a government or a political party is doing something in government that actually goes against the nation's interest or the country's interest, and there's no mechanism to resolve that. Does that end up with a quango, or how do you solve those sorts of, and does that frustrate the people in the civil service? It must do.
Well, it upset me. And to answer your question about what happens, in the system we've got right now, politics wins. Politics always wins right now. So the way in which the civil services job is interpreted is that it's there to do the political will. And this is right in a democracy. It is right that people should have a say at elections about the direction that we want to take. And then it is right that that direction should be executed. And also, though, and the moment, I guess, that I could describe for me where this first personally became really, really clear was when I was doing a communications job around Iraq in 2003 and was asked to put together a public case for why it was important to support the American invasion and go for it. This is the thing that later became known as the dodgy dossier. So I said to my boss, right, yes, absolutely, and proposed a process whereby we would bring together all of the information that we had gathered as the government, redact it as and where necessary, and put something together. And the answer came back, there's plenty of stuff already in the public domain, just sort of put that together and let's get that out quickly. So I had a real moment then of actually, I'm not sure that that's right. And the choice for me was do it or don't do it. And the only thing that I felt able to do in that situation was just personally not do it. So I didn't, but somebody else was found to do that. So I think, in the system that we've constructed right now, I've seen a lot of people reach that moment of choice. And Iraq, as we know, a lot of people resigned over Brexit. I think we saw the same sort of thing. But fundamentally, it comes down to get with the politics or leave.
Yeah. And in terms of sort of pivotal moments in your career, and I think you ended up in the Cabinet Office, if I'm right. Are there landmark moments where you found people great mentors, or as they prepared you for leadership, did you find people help develop your skills? Or I love the DIY career sort of aspect, but there must be a mechanism like in business where people are guided and people want to help you succeed. Did that happen?
There are lots of people from whom I've learnt over my career. And when I first started, there were a lot of people I admired. I should say that I've left the Cabinet Office now. And part of the reason for that was that I looked up and around and there wasn't anybody that I admired anymore or wanted to work for. And there wasn't a role that I thought, right, that's absolutely what I want to be able to do to take the country forward. The Cabinet Office is my home department. So this is the part of government that is meant to make the whole of government come together and work together to do the job of government, basically to organise the country, the stuff that we want to do collectively. And at the heart of the Cabinet Office you could look at it really as a big decision-making machine. It's the part that serves up the biggest decisions to prime ministers and to governments over time, and on and off. I was in the Cabinet Office for 25 years. And in preparing myself for higher jobs in the civil service, I thought it was phenomenally important, actually, not just to get stuck in the centre, not just to stay stuck in government. I see too much of that going on. So I made a point of doing stints in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Brussels, and I wanted to see how we worked as part of that bigger system of international governments, as part of a system also including local government, to get things done. And I wanted to see how our policies play out on the ground. So I have often seen over my career this sort of process of detachment. The decision-making happens at the centre in a bit of a bubble. Yeah. And it's difficult really to be aware of, the effects. And you have to sort of get out there to really sort of touch and feel them, to understand how these things translate. I think in this sense, government's a tough gig, really, because you take these decisions and the cause and effect isn't always very clear. The consequences play out over often immense distances and long periods of time. So it's difficult to make that link. I've always been extremely interested by the study of human factors in government. So what it means to be human in this big system. And if I could found a university chair, then it would be to just understand this better. We understand this incredibly well in disciplines like aviation and medicine, where someone makes a mistake, a decision goes wrong, people die, airplanes crash, we can see the consequences straight away. And so checks and balances have been built into the cockpit, for example, when flying, to try to minimize the risk of that sort of human error. This isn't how we've constructed our government system. Our processes don't aim off for the humans in them. And so my basic takeaway from ultimately having served 8 prime ministers, that's a lot actually, and their governments, and served up decisions to them over time, is that this isn't a logical way for a country to take decisions, and we really need to get on top of that. And that's why I've ended up leaving.
And I mean, I know it's a big pivotal moment at the moment, and you've been working on what's called the National Strategy Project. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and what you hope to do with that?
Yes. So the National Strategy Project started because of this realization that we were, as a country, not taking the decisions that we need to take, not making the big investments that we need to make in just being resilient, in being secure, in being healthy and prosperous. And the way I saw it off the back of these 25 years, serving up decisions to successive prime ministers, was that there had to be a better way of bringing the country together behind a shared sense for where we want to get to in the long term. We just don't have that right now. And without that, we can't hope to achieve that. There's just no way of doing that. And I went out there, first of all, with a question. How could we co-create that vision for a country's future and build a means to achieve it in a way that brings people with us, so builds public consent around this, in a way that's rooted in the actual realities we face, not just the stories that we're told to help win elections, and that also has a really robust way of making these decisions stick, doing stuff over time, persisting. Because the system that we've got at the moment, politicians, governments come and go, Parliament can't bind its successors. At most, we get to stick to decisions for 5 years or so before somebody comes along and thinks that there's a better way, or before the country quite rightly feels, right, okay, this isn't working well yet, we need to change. So the National Strategy Project has developed over the process of the last year a plan now for doing this, for filling what I see is the biggest gap in our institutions that's stopping the whole system from working. And that is that we just don't have any part of our system right now that's responsible for the long-term public good, that articulates what type of country we want to be, what our goals are, and then brings us together across sectors to actually make that happen and persists over time. The other big takeaway I have from my years in government is that, gone are the days when the challenges we face in the world, when any of them can be addressed by government alone anymore. Everything needs to be a cross-sector, and pretty much everything, the big stuff, the technological transformation, what we're seeing with the environment and the environmental transformation, war in Europe, all of these big shifts, are the demographic shifts we're seeing. All of these things also require each of us individually in society to make different individual choices. We need to be investing in our energy efficiency. We need to, the shifts are quite big. So, we can't rely on government alone anymore to do that. So what does this look like? Well, we've put together a plan that involves 3 things to do this. The starting point is creating a home for any of this to happen in the first place. So that enduring part of the system, we're calling it the Institute for Our Nation. So this is the home that will enable us to come together to shape our shared future. Then the first step in that process is putting together the knowledge, frankly, that we don't have right now, that helps us to understand the realities that we're facing. At the moment, our public discourse is mainly about the extremes, and more than that, the extremes that the political parties in particular feel are most likely to win elections. We're not hearing where the informed mass of just normal people want to go, what they think. So the first step is to put together the knowledge that makes it possible for us to have an informed discussion about these things. The second step then is deliberation. It's having that conversation together as a country. And I use the word deliberation because it's not just any sort of conversation. This is a dialogue that's informed. This is a process that's been developed over many, many years, and it brings together small groups of people. So you'll be talking with 10, 12 others who are different to you about the realities the country's facing. And you'll be asked the question, right, okay, given this information, what do you think matters most for the UK's future? And what are we prepared to do about it? And the value of that process is it shows us where public judgment, informed public judgment, is on what matters most for our future. It's not just a dipstick of public opinion, what people think now. It's right, sort of given the realities, where are we prepared to go to? The third step then is to bring all of this together into a national strategy. And by that, I mean a set of shared goals. This is where we want to be as a society, backed up by actual practical plans, rooted in realities, or at least a practical range of options. This is what's feasible. And a vision. Here's where we want to be, underpinned by the values we share.
That sounds remarkable and very, very ambitious. Is the intention to try to get that available to all political parties and make that available before the next election? When is that, 28, 29? So is that the intention, and build that sort of national dialogue?
So the intention is to make it available to everyone, and to prompt the people who need to act off the back of it to do so. So by the middle of 2028, which on our working assumption will be a year ahead of the next general election or thereabouts, by the middle of 2028, we want to have pulled together that strategy, that set of shared goals, the viable options for how to address them, so that political parties can respond in their manifestos, yes, but also so that we have a more informed electorate. So on the political party responses, for example, you could envisage different responses to the trade-offs that the realities require. You could envisage a green response looking very different to a conservative response. You could envisage a response that says, right, okay, we're going to not have the nuclear deterrent. We're going to invest instead in energy and efficiency incentives. You could imagine different responses to the pressures that the country is facing from others. The point about having a more informed electorate. So the plan for the national dialogue is that we should reach as much of the country as possible. We want to engage the whole nation in this. So disillusioned people, the vulnerable, the very young, the very old, the parts that political discourse doesn't normally reach, because we want to end up not just with public consent around this, but people with the information to make informed choices at elections. So, I mean, the first cycle of this may not be perfect. Our ambition is to reach 2 million people through online deliberation, but we also recognise that with the best will in the world, not everybody can be reached that way or will want to be reached that way. So we also have plans for a big national campaign, so the equivalent of Red Nose Day, but for our country's future, to get everybody involved and thinking about, okay, well, what do we want for our future? What I hope and expect to see off the back of that is a sort of activation of people in the country, a defibrillator for our democracy. We know that this will be achieved through the people who take part in the deliberation, because it's incredibly well documented that the act of deliberation is extremely powerful. There's something about that exchange of views, that communion with other people who are in the same boat, but not like us. The effect that has, it builds respect. It actually creates more active, more engaged citizens, full stop. So the reason I can say this with confidence is that we're partnering with Stanford University to deliver this, and they've done this over the last 40 years in many countries, hundreds of times, and have extraordinary results from that. So the effects that we're looking for go beyond simply a political response. We should see a social response as well. And then most importantly, we're building infrastructure that we can use again and again through this, that we can use to develop further plans, to hold leaders to account. You could envisage this cycle of deliberation and iteration of the strategy as part of the electoral cycle. So in between elections, doing that routinely. But there are many other uses for it as well. Enduring nature of that is very important, because another thing that I've seen sort of up close in government is how really bad we are right now at making decisions and investments stick, actually sustaining them over time. And if we look around the world, the most successful countries are the ones that have found ways to do that. The ways look different. The ways are adapted to the country's culture. This way is adapted to our culture. But without that long-term direction, without the means to make it stick, we don't stand a hope of getting anywhere near the goals that we would like. I think, national leadership, that's what it's about.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like wow. I mean, that would be amazing to have the population actually influencing and creating a non-political perspective on what they, value, I guess they value most, and what type of country they want to live in, and how we all thrive.
Well, we have the knowledge now, and we have the tools. We've got the tech. We've got all of the ingredients that we need to do this. We need to just get on and do it now.
Is it technology that's enabled this to happen now? Is AI is the phrase of the moment? Is agentic AI or AI the clue to, or is that the catalyst to enable this to happen now in a meaningful way? Because it's been very difficult to do. It's just been survey after survey after survey, and proper dialogue and people coming together. That would be remarkable.
Technology is the means to the end. So yes, technology is incredibly helpful. Technology is the thing that will make it possible for us to scale that deliberation nationally to reach millions and millions of people potentially. And technology will be hugely helpful to help us make sense of it as well. But it's the means to the end, not the end in itself. It's created the opportunity for us. Yeah.
Well, I wish you every sort of success with that venture. It sounds amazing. And I'm sure if people want to get involved, is there a website people can look at and things like that?
Right. There is a website, www.nationalstrategy.uk.
Fantastic. Hopefully people will be inspired to sort of get involved and help you build that. I mean, just going back to something you sort of said earlier, I think you said you went out to Iraq and Afghanistan and Brussels. Did you actually move there?
Yes.
Yeah, wow. Was that sort of a big pivotal moment in your life to see the UK from outside the UK? And how did that affect you?
Oh, that's a good question. Yes, is the short answer. I think I already had that, though, because of having been what felt like uprooted at the age of 8. So we moved to Northern Ireland when I was 8. And that, I think, was the first experience that made me realize, oh, right, not everybody does things the way that I thought was normal for everybody. And then I suppose that traveling, which I think is the most important experience for anybody to go through, if at all possible, because of bringing home exactly that, just reinforced that and gave me more material to go on. I mean, you can't go to somewhere like Vietnam or South Korea and not come away thinking, right, wow, something has created a sense of national community here. Something is making people want to come together to create a better future for everybody. And it's that sort of sense that I want to bring back to the UK now, because one of the things that I think that we lack here is that, well, I know we lack here, is that sense of collective spirit, that we do have a future together, that we are a national community, whatever that might look like in practice.
No, I mean, I've just come back from a trip around Asia and visiting several Asian countries. And I was just struck by the progress, the energy, the excitement, the opportunity that they all see for growth. And it really felt to me like not just the UK, but Europe it needs that re-injection, or it needs the next sort of phase of energy to help us all thrive and grow and feel more positive again. The positivity in Asia was just incredible. And I think if the National Strategy Project can help with that, that would be immensely, immensely valuable.
Yes, because that energy is there and we're just not harnessing it right now.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And so, yes, I do want the project to build a way to harness all of that and bring it all together. It's that bridging mechanism and that switching on of people to, there can be other ways to do this. I mean, look, when we have traditionally done this before at this sort of national level, it's been because of war. And one of the things that I see is an incredibly complacent country right now. We have just taken everything that the generations before us have built, and we haven't bothered to rethink them or to adapt them to a world that has changed absolutely massively. It's high time we did that. And yeah, we have the energy, we have the knowledge. Let's just get on with it. But you're right. None of this will happen unless we all step up now. If we want to be all right as a nation without having to go through another hideous experience together to actually sort of organise that energy, then we have to do this now. The biggest act of leadership and the biggest test of my own leadership to try to pull this together. But I don't want to be one of those people who has an uneasy death thinking, I saw this and I did nothing about it. I think that's unfair.
Amazing. And a brilliant point to sort of draw the serious part of the conversation to a close. Now, we always end with a bit of a fun fact. And if I've got this wrong, apologies, but I believe you are a pilot. Is that right?
Yes, I used to be. Well,
do you still fly?
Used to fly a lot. Oh, Dave, I would absolutely love to. There is something about being physically high up. In the same way that I think everyone should do a martial art, there's something about the physical balance that you have to achieve doing martial arts. There's something about the physical perspective you get when you're high up that's just like nothing else. So climbing mountains, flying planes, anything like that. And yes, I always wanted to fly. I think the air is my element. It's definitely not the water. I think water has a mind of its own. In air, you can just soar.
And how did you get into flying? At what age? Yeah, tell me a bit more about when that happened and why.
So one of the joys about growing up in Northern Ireland is that it's a small place and lots of stuff happens, and it's a can-do sort of place as well. And so I was really lucky, local flying club, and I was able to pitch up and CAD rides as much as possible. And then when I was at university, I had big plans with the army to go and climb Angel Falls, but I stupidly jumped out of an aeroplane on a parachute beforehand and did my back in. So I suddenly had a blank summer holiday, and I knuckled down and I did my pilot's exams and got my pilot's license. And this was so exciting, because then it turned out when I started in the civil service, there used to be a civil service plane, a really old sort of rust bucket basically, but you could borrow it relatively cheaply and you could fly over to Lutuke for lunch, and it just was so brilliant to be able to do that. But then quite quickly it all became unaffordable. And also, I'm not sure about this thing of burping fumes out for fun. It started to sit uneasy with me. So I would love to revive my license, and I would love to do that in little electric aircraft that have come out.
They're coming fast, aren't they? They're coming very fast. Well, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you, and I'm amazed by some of the things you've been sort of sharing, and I wish you every success with the National Strategy Project. I'm sure everybody listening will. And thank you for coming on Pivot Points, Catherine.
It was such a pleasure. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Pivot Points. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find more fascinating conversations with industry leaders in our previous episodes. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to know more about Brampai and how we deliver impact in the pivotal moments that matter to you, head over to brampai.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.